But first, Brexit. A lot of the headlines in the last few weeks about UK-EU relations have obviously been taken up with vaccine wars and vaccine rows, but what about the business actually going on at the border? Or rather, the business that is not going on at the border ever since the 1st of January. Richard Brooks is one of the ICE hacks. He has actually made his own pilgrimage down to Kent to see what was going on and what was not going on as a result. Lots of the expected chaos and the mayhem of Brexit that was predicted has not quite materialised, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are maybe just as damaging going on instead. Here's Richard with his impressions of exactly what he saw when he went down there.
The obvious thing is the sort of mayhem, given how little there is there. So you arrive at this, certainly the Ashford truck stop place that I went to at Waterbrook Park. There weren't a huge number of lorries there, but the ones that were there were getting snarled up on this kind of weird series of mini roundabouts on this industrial park, going from one point to another, having not got their paperwork right. So having to move between border points, customs agents, and then getting this kind of gridlock on this weird industrial estate. So it's just all a bit grim.
And these are all lorries which are leaving? That we're talking
Those
about.
were leaving, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Almost all of them were European lorries. So their drivers were queuing up at the customs agent's house to get advice and paperwork completed and then going back to the border point. So they were all getting pretty well delayed. But the reason you're not seeing the queues of lorries backing up the M20 is that the government's strategy for mitigating the delays is simply not to have much business. So you make it, the genius really is that the paperwork is so much trouble that lots of businesses have decided just not to do it and to sort of hibernate, at least for a few months. So the volumes, as you mentioned, volumes of traffic are way down. And a lot of I think it's something like between 40 and 50% of lorries leaving are empty, just because the firms that own them want to get them back to Europe as quickly as possible, or within normal time scales, not taking 5 days. So it's not economic for them to take an export job.
And then, obviously, that might create a problem in future where people are slightly more reluctant to commit lorries to coming over here in the first place because they don't know how long it's going to take them to get out if they're doing another job. Or it makes it less economical to bring anything in.
Yeah, and exporters it's not worth exporters doing the business.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, the interesting thing is that the hauliers and the freight associations are saying, look, this is not just a teething problem. It's becoming a structural problem. This is what we're faced with. So if you've got things that need to move fairly quickly, especially perishable stuff, it's hardly worth bothering.
So we're going to need to talk a little bit about paperwork and IT problems. And obviously, we're both very interested in these. But for the benefit of any listeners, we're going to make this as riveting as possible because you have actually dived into this system yourself. And so the first thing I want to talk about in the paperwork thing is the Kermit.
Yeah, the Kermit.
Yeah.
It's not officially called the Kermit. Even this government hasn't started naming initiatives after Muppet Show characters.
It's too on the nose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We'll probably be there soon. But the Kermit is the Kent Access Permit. A permit you get online by saying that you have all your paperwork in order. And the idea is that a lorry, let's say you're coming from Wolverhampton and you're exporting some stuff to Germany and you're going via Dover and Calais. The idea is that you're not allowed into Kent unless you have one of these permits. It's to stop the roads in Kent getting snarled up and to make sure people do in advance have their paperwork in order. The flaw in this plan is that you can tick all the boxes saying everything's in order without having everything in order at all. In fact, without having any paperwork at all, or even without having a lorry, which was my situation when I applied for one a couple of weeks ago. I just entered the box. I put a registration number for my articulated lorry, my HGV. I think the registration was EYE 1539, which was
very nice.
The number,
the
of
issue number of the magazine. Love it. Okay.
And I said yes to, I've got this bit of paperwork. Yes, I've got that. Yes, I've got the other. No, I haven't got any guns or live animals. And I was off. Got my permit, valid for 24 hours.
And so then off you went to Kent.
I did, but I went in a 10-year-old Skoda, not a 25-ton HGV.
Okay. But the point is that anyone can get these, and that people are vouching for having the paperwork, hoping that it's going to be all sorted and all right by the time they actually make the journey.
Yeah,
right.
But then you turn up and you haven't got it. And a lot of hauliers actually, they're sort of, they're not being too cynical about it, but because the paperwork takes a long time, they apply for the permit, assuming that the paperwork will come through while they're on the road, because otherwise they'd have to wait several hours at the depot, which could be halfway across the country, which is just more delays. And then they get to the port and they get turned around, or they have to park up and do it all online, or get their agents to do it online, and it becomes a bit of a mess.
And when you say they're parking up, where exactly are they parking up? Is there just an enormous car park that they're
there's just a big car park, with very poor facilities.
Is this Waterbrook Park?
At the moment it's Waterbrook Park. It should be another one called Sevington, which is much bigger, just outside Ashford. But that's not ready. Like some, the government only had about 4.5 years to prepare a car park, so they didn't get there. So the park with the full border points, the full 12-lane border points that there's supposed to be, isn't ready, and they're using this one next door.
Okay, and Waterbrook is just something that they've effectively hired from somebody.
Yeah, they hired it over a year ago as a contingency.
And you have been covering the person who owns Waterbrook Park, who obviously must be delighted at all this extra custom that they're getting.
The idea was that it would be developed as partly as a truck stop, where and there is a kind of building facility where truckers can stay overnight, but also as a residential park and for businesses and so on. And it's owned by a Kent company controlled by a property magnate down there called Darrell Healy. I mean, he's a man of Kent, or is he a Kentish man? I can't remember. We could get some letters on that. Or he was a Kentish man until several years ago he decided he'd become a Monaco man. And he got into a spot of bother with the tax authorities. It looks like he disappeared one year, and then the next year he spent a bit more time than he was allowed to back in the UK, presumably running his business. So HMRC said, aha, you're not a non-resident, you're still a UK man. So that was his run-in with the revenue, and he's now their landlord, coining in about £7 million a year.
I mean, it's an ill wind.
Yes. It's quite an ill wind down there, but it's even that one's blown some good for Mr. Healy. Yeah.
So the situation you have is that you've got a slightly inadequate contingency plan car park or lorry park rather, where all these lorries are turning up. They are being delayed because a lot of them have got the Kent access permit, but they don't actually have all the paperwork they need. So they're being held back. As a result of all this, businesses are not sending over, they're not exporting to Europe, they're just waiting and seeing if this calms down. But even this is with about half the normal capacity, so that the traffic jams have been avoided, but the chaos is happening. It's just not happening in Waterbrook Park. Is that fair?
Yeah, the chaos is being mitigated by the fact that not many people are going down there. They don't want to get involved, which is the worst of both worlds, which is, quite a trick to pull off. But you manage to increase the bureaucracy and reduce the business. We're always told that the point of, that we would reduce bureaucracy and therefore get more business. We've somehow that was the point of Brexit in a way, but somehow we've contrived completely the opposite in both cases.
Exactly. So the chaos is really happening at tables around the countryside where people are saying we just can't export anything, so we're not going to send anything.
Yeah, and a lot of businesses will go out of business as a result.
Now, as if this wasn't all enough, I know that you've written about the IT problems as well, where people are relying on slightly aged and inefficient systems. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, there's a sort of a mishmash of old and not very efficient systems and new and not quite ready systems, which is sort of standard government IT development policy. But it just means that the exporters and hauliers have so many systems to deal with, and they have systems checking the systems. The nature of what they're doing hasn't quite been worked out properly. So it looks like the government didn't quite understand that most export from Britain, certainly from ports like Dover, is not to France. It's going through France. It's ending up in another country. It's called transit. Now, that didn't matter when we were in the EU because, every country was just the same, really. There was no customs borders. But now, if you are exporting something from the UK to Hungary and you have 2 or 3 countries to go through, if your goods don't end up in Hungary, then you probably incurred duties, customs duties and VAT in some country along the way. We don't know which.
Right.
So in order to export, you have to put up a guarantee that you will pay any of those duties should your goods not arrive in the destination you say they're ultimately going to. That means you have to get an insurance policy in place, and it all gets quite complicated. And you've got to feed that through a rickety IT system that it wasn't used very much because it was only needed when you were going out of the EU the other side, like if you were going as far as Turkey or something. Right. Whereas now it's needed for almost everything, for 80% of exports. It's these kind of things that appear not to have been properly thought through.
That's the thing called the Comprehensive Customs Guarantee, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, who would sign up for that?
Well, there are. I mean, it's its own world, the customs world. There are operators who do that kind of thing. There are bankers who have divisions that do that. But you've got to get it organised. And a lot of firms weren't quite ready for it. And the government appears not to have been quite ready for that kind of snag.
I mean, have you got anything else? Or is it just these few little matters? As you say, they're not teething problems. Apparently they appear to be the way the new system is meant to work.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it will make some business very uneconomic. What you're seeing now is the first glimpses of this. But over time, what you find is just that some business doesn't get done because of the extra costs. It's exactly as many economists predicted. Well, there'll be an effect on the economy, on economic activity, on gross domestic product. You'll see these kind of things chipping away at it. So that's the real cost. There may at some point when traffic has to pick up a bit, because the other sort of statistics are around how much companies have stockpiled. Companies stockpiled a lot ahead of the end of the transition period and because of COVID and so on. When their stockpiles run down and they actually have to start importing and exporting a bit more, then you might see some snarl-ups. But after that, the longer-term effect is just going to be a gradual erosion of business.
Always cheerful to have you on the podcast, Richard.
It's not Good News Corner, I'm afraid.